I stormed upstairs, flung open the bedroom door, and caught my cheating wife with her boss, both half-dressed. My name is Gavin O'Connor, and for as long as I could remember, I had always lived in the shadows of my family's expectations. Growing up, I rarely saw my parents. They were always buried in work, and it often felt like they lived in their own world, a world where I didn't quite belong. Books became my escape, my safe place to run to when I needed comfort. I often dreamed of finding a true connection, someone who could fill the empty spaces inside me. That was until I met her, María Santos. I met Maria in high school, and what started as a friendship quickly bloomed into a love I had never imagined. She was everything I wasn't: outgoing, athletic, confident. I was more reserved, bookish, and unsure of myself. But together we fit. We balanced each other out in ways I never thought possible. We spent years together: high school, college, and finally marriage. She became my best friend, my partner, my everything. I promised her forever, and I meant it. But like most things in life, it wasn't meant to last forever. After 3 years of marriage, cracks started appearing. Maria, once my vibrant and loving wife, began to pull away. She started working late, staying distant, and her eyes no longer had the same warmth when she looked at me. It didn't take long for me to realize something was wrong, that she no longer cared for me the way she once did. It was one evening when she came home later than usual, a quiet tension in the air. She looked different, distant, cold. When she sat down across from me, I could see the anxiety in her eyes. I knew something was coming, but I couldn't prepare myself for what she said next. "I think it's time we talk, Gavin," she said, her voice softer than usual. I think we need to part ways." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but strangely, there was a part of me that wasn't shocked. In the back of my mind, I had already known. I had already felt her slipping away, but hearing it from her lips still felt like a betrayal. I could barely speak as I tried to process the flood of emotions overwhelming me. Anger, sadness, confusion, all blending into one. "I want a divorce," she continued. Her eyes welled up, but not enough to cry. "I love you, Gavin, but I can't keep pretending." There was no argument, no shouting, no blaming. She just gave up, just like that. I don't understand," was all I could manage to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "What happened to us? I don't want to go into details. It'll only hurt more," she said, avoiding my gaze. "But we both know it's over. I think you deserve more than this. You deserve someone who truly loves you." The words cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. Maria was leaving, and I was powerless to stop her. I nodded, fighting back tears, but no words of anger or pleading came out. There was no use in fighting for a love that had already died. 2 weeks later, we sat in a lawyer's office. It was official. The papers were signed. The house was sold. Our lives, once intertwined, were now separate. I kept the old truck and she kept the new car. Felt like the final nail in the coffin. But there was something I hadn't known. Something I was about to find out the hard way. In the quiet after the storm, when all the papers were signed and the divorce was finalized, I thought I was ready to start over. I rented a small apartment near my office and focused on rebuilding my life. But the nagging feeling of betrayal lingered, even though I tried to push it aside. Then one day, as I was cleaning the house, something caught my eye. A small item on the bathroom counter. It was a pregnancy test. My heart stopped as I picked it up. The results were positive. I froze. My mind raced. Why would Maria need a pregnancy test? Wasn't she on birth control? I checked the birth control pills in the medicine cabinet. They were untouched. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't stay ignorant any longer. I had to know the truth. That evening, I called Maria's office to ask her about it, but her phone redirected to reception. They told me she had already left for the day. But when I drove to her office, hoping to catch her, I was met with an even more gut-wrenching discovery. Her car was still in the parking lot. And then Michael James, her boss, the man I had always respected, pulled up beside her. And there they were, kissing. The world tilted on its axis. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. I was too late. She had already moved on. It wasn't just the pregnancy test. It was everything. The lies, the betrayal. I had caught her red-handed. That night, when Maria came home, I said nothing. She barely glanced at me, and I kept my feelings hidden, even though I was burning inside. She had already made her choice, and I was no longer a part of her life. By the end of the evening, I knew my marriage was over. In 2 hours, everything had changed. I had been living a lie. I packed my things and left that night, knowing I would never go back. I couldn't stay where I wasn't wanted. I couldn't be with a woman who had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way. I drove for hours, not knowing where I was going, but feeling a sense of relief with each mile I put between myself and her. I was leaving everything behind. My home, my marriage, my family. I was starting over. Part 1 summary. In Part 1, Gavin O'Connor's world shatters as his wife, Maria, asks for a divorce, revealing that their relationship has been falling apart. Despite his love for her, he agrees to the separation. Later, Gavin uncovers a devastating truth. Maria is pregnant, and her betrayal with her boss, Michael James, comes to light. Gavin decides to leave everything behind, starting a new life with nothing but the hurt and heartbreak from his past. The next few days after I left felt like a blur. I drove aimlessly across the country, my heart heavy with disbelief. It had only been 3 years, but the reality of my marriage crumbling felt like an eternity. I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. I only knew I couldn't stay in that house anymore, not with the memories of Maria lingering in every corner, every room, every space I used to call home. After days of driving through empty highways and unfamiliar landscapes, I finally arrived in Las Vegas. The bright lights and constant buzz of the city were overwhelming at first, but they were exactly what I needed. I had no one here, no family, no history, nothing that tied me to my old life. This was a new beginning. I checked into a modest hotel, rented an apartment near my office, and threw myself into work, hoping to bury my emotions in the pile of legal documents and contracts that awaited me. The loneliness was crushing, but I kept telling myself it would pass. I was a 25-year-old man starting over. I was free. I could rebuild. But the wounds from my past were far from healed. 2 months passed in a haze. I buried myself in law school and work, keeping to myself. I didn't date, didn't make friends, just worked. It was easier that way. The pain from the divorce still clung to me like a shadow, and I often found myself thinking about what had happened between Maria and me. I had tried to understand what went wrong, but the truth kept eluding me. I thought of the pregnancy test, her empty promises, and the image of her kissing her boss. She had moved on quickly, while I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. But then, one day, something unexpected happened. I received a letter from the Santos family, Maria's parents. Miguel and Maria Santos had been like a second family to me, especially after my own parents had distanced themselves when my mother passed away from cancer. I had grown close to them during my relationship with Maria, and they had always supported me through the rough times. In the letter, they told me they were proud of me and had been following my progress with pride. They had heard about my achievements in Las Vegas and wanted to meet me. I was taken aback. It had been months since the divorce, and I hadn't heard from them in ages. The last time we spoke, Maria had barely reacted when I mentioned speaking to her father. It seemed like they were trying to fix things, but the wounds were still too fresh for me to consider returning to their lives. Still, I couldn't ignore their invitation. They were family, after all. I agreed to meet them, but part of me was already bracing for the awkwardness that would follow. How could I face them when their daughter had left me for another man? How could I sit across from them without feeling the anger bubbling inside? When I arrived at their house, María Santos greeted me with open arms, her warmth washing over me like it always had. "Gavin, it's so good to see you," she said, her voice filled with genuine affection. "We've missed you. We're so proud of everything you've done." Her words stung, but I forced a smile. Miguel, her husband, also welcomed me, though he was quieter than usual. He had always been a man of few words, but I could see the concern in his eyes. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a shared pain that neither of us wanted to confront. We spent the evening reminiscing about old times, laughing and eating dinner as if nothing had changed. But I could feel the tension simmering beneath the surface. I knew they were trying to fix things, trying to offer me the comfort of their company, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to forgive their daughter, let alone be a part of their lives again. As the night went on, I found myself retreating deeper into my thoughts. I had built a life for myself in Las Vegas. I had a new career, a fresh start, and most importantly, I was free of the chains that had once bound me to Maria. But the more I sat there, the more I realized that no matter how far I ran, the past always seemed to catch up with me. 2 weeks later, Miguel invited me to meet with him alone. I agreed, not sure what to expect, but knowing that I needed some closure. We met at a quiet park, far from the distractions of the city. Miguel sat across from me, his face serious but not unkind. "Gavin, I know this hasn't been easy for you," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I know what happened with Maria. It was a betrayal, and I understand why you left her. But I also want you to know that she never stopped loving you." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "She never stopped loving me?" I repeated, my voice shaking with disbelief. "Then why did she leave me for another man? Why did she destroy everything we had?" Miguel sighed deeply, his eyes distant. "I don't have the answers, Gavin. All I can tell you is that she was confused. She made a mistake, and now she's paying for it. Her life has fallen apart in ways she never expected. She's lost everything." I stared at him, my heart aching as the weight of his words settled in. I had never seen Maria like this. The confident woman I had married was now broken, just like me. But I wasn't sure if I could find it in myself to care. "I don't know if I can forgive her," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Miguel's eyes softened. "I don't expect you to, Gavin, but I want you to know that we still care about you. You'll always be a part of this family. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive her someday." I didn't respond, but in my heart, I knew the truth. I had already forgiven Maria. I had let go of the anger and the betrayal. But forgiveness didn't mean that I could forget. It didn't mean that I could just pick up where we left off. In the days that followed, I found myself wrestling with conflicting emotions. My heart was still raw, still scarred from the wounds she had inflicted. But I had learned something important in the months since the divorce. I had learned that I could survive this. I had learned that I could start over, that I didn't need her to be happy. And with that realization, I made the decision that would change my life forever. As the months passed in Las Vegas, I found myself settling into a new rhythm. My life had slowly started to take shape again, though it wasn't the life I had expected. I had my career, my studies, a small apartment that felt more like a sanctuary than a home, And most importantly, I had my freedom. The memories of Maria, while painful, were becoming distant, nothing more than a part of my past. But even though I had built a new life, I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I had lived so many years giving everything to a relationship that ultimately collapsed. And now, I was alone. I hadn't truly dated anyone in months. The idea of allowing someone else into my heart seemed like an impossible task. The scars Maria left behind were still there, and I wasn't ready to open myself up to anyone else. Not yet. One day, as I walked through a local cafe, my eyes caught a glimpse of a familiar face. At first, I didn't recognize her, but then it hit me. It was Amy, the girl I had met a few months ago when I was helping her with a housing issue. She had been kind and grateful, and we had exchanged pleasantries, but that was the extent of our relationship. Amy had always been friendly, and though I'd noticed the way she looked at me sometimes, I never considered anything more. I wasn't ready for anything, especially not with someone like her. But there she was, sitting at a table by the window, with a smile that seemed to light up the room. She waved at me when she saw me, and I couldn't help but walk over. "Gavin, wow, it's been a while. How have you been?" She greeted me warmly. There was no awkwardness in her voice, no hidden agenda, just genuine friendliness. "I've been good," I replied, taking a seat across from her. "Just keeping busy, you know? Work, school. The usual." "I totally get that. Same here," she said, her eyes sparkling as she took a sip of her coffee. "You look like you're doing well though. I've heard about some of your achievements lately. Las Vegas seems to be treating you well." I smiled modestly. "It has its ups and downs, but yeah, it's been a good change." We spent the next hour talking about everything: life, work, and even some lighthearted stories from our pasts. It was refreshing. For the first time in months, I felt a genuine connection with someone. It was easy, comfortable. I realized how much I missed just talking to someone about anything, everything. By the end of our conversation, Amy asked, "Do you want to grab dinner sometime? Just the two of us. No strings attached, just a friendly dinner." I hesitated. It had been a long time since I'd even considered spending time with anyone in that way. But Amy was different. She wasn't trying to fix me, wasn't trying to be something I needed. She was just there. "Yeah, sure," I said, surprising myself. "That sounds nice." A few days later, we met at a cozy restaurant downtown. The evening was casual, and the conversation flowed easily. Amy had a way of making everything feel light, even the serious topics. I found myself laughing, something I hadn't done in a long time. It felt like a small weight had been lifted off my chest, and I could breathe easier. Over the next few weeks, we saw each other more often. Sometimes it was for dinner, other times for a walk through the park, just talking. The connection between us was undeniable, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't ready to let anyone in. I had been hurt too badly by Maria, and I wasn't sure if I could go through that again. One night, after a particularly long day at work, Amy called me and asked if I wanted to come over to her apartment for a movie night. I was exhausted, but the thought of spending more time with her sounded comforting. I agreed. When I arrived, Amy greeted me with a warm hug, and we settled on the couch with some snacks. The movie played, but I wasn't really watching it. I was more focused on her. The way she smiled, the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed. There was something so comforting about being around her, something so different from what I had with Maria. I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward her. Halfway through the movie, Amy turned to me, her expression serious but gentle. "Gavin," she said softly, "I know you've been through a lot, and I know that you're not ready for anything, but I just want you to know, I'm here. I like you. A lot." And if you ever want to take things further, I'm willing to wait. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. No one had ever said something like that to me before. It was honest, vulnerable, and raw. I looked into her eyes, trying to process what she was saying. I knew there was something special between us, but the walls I had built around myself made it hard to believe that I could let anyone in again. I wanted to, though. I wanted to believe that there was still hope for me to find happiness. I don't know if I'm ready, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I understand, she said with a soft smile. You don't have to rush anything, but just know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. It was the first time in a long time that I didn't feel completely alone. Amy's words gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, I could heal from the past and start again. But it wasn't just about moving on. It was about finding something real again. I wasn't sure what that meant yet, but for the first time in months, I allowed myself to hope. It was easy to let Amy into my life at first. She was kind, gentle, and patient. Everything I needed to feel like there was still goodness in the world. Over the next few months, we spent more time together. Sometimes it was just the two of us, exploring the city, trying new restaurants, or visiting art exhibits. Other times, we hung out with her friends, and I started feeling like maybe this could be something real. I began to trust her, which for me was a big deal. But as much as I cared for her, something was still holding me back. I couldn't shake the guilt. Maria had been my first love. I had invested years into our relationship, and even though she had hurt me deeply, I still carried that part of me with her. It felt wrong to even think about being with someone else when I hadn't fully dealt with my feelings about my failed marriage. One evening after we had spent the day together, Amy and I sat down for dinner in her apartment. The air between us was different tonight, heavier, charged with something unspoken. I've been thinking, Gavin, Amy started, her voice soft yet steady. We've been seeing each other for months now, and I know you're not ready, but I need to know what you want. I set my fork down, my stomach tight. What do you mean? I mean, I care about you, Gavin, a lot, but I can't keep waiting for you to make a decision. I'm not asking you to forget everything that's happened. I'm not asking you to jump into something you're not ready for. But what is this? Where are we going? Her words felt like a punch in the gut. I knew what she was saying, and I had been avoiding it for so long. I wasn't the kind of man who could jump into a new relationship without considering the damage it might do to both people involved. I cared for Amy deeply, but I was still tangled up in the remnants of my past, and it wasn't fair to drag her into that. I don't know, Amy, I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. I think about you all the time, but I still haven't fully let go of what happened with Maria. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to. She nodded, her face softening with understanding. Gavin, I'm not asking you to forget, but you can't keep living in the past forever. It's not fair to either of us. If you can't move forward with me, then I need to know. I looked at her, my heart aching. She deserved someone who could give her all of me, not just the broken pieces I was still working on. I'm not ready, Amy. Not yet. There was a silence between us, a heavy weight in the air. Amy didn't say anything for a long time, but when she finally spoke, her voice was calm, but there was a sadness in it that broke me. I understand, she said. I don't want to force you to make a decision before you're ready, but I can't keep living in limbo. I need to know if this is going anywhere. I stood up from the table, my mind spinning. I couldn't answer her right then. My feelings for her were real, but I wasn't sure if I was capable of truly giving her the love and commitment she deserved. I'm sorry, Amy, I said quietly, my chest tightening. I don't want to hurt you, but I can't promise you anything right now. I need time. She didn't argue with me. She just looked at me, her expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, she stood up and walked over to me. For a moment, I thought she was going to leave, but instead, she simply gave me a soft kiss on the cheek. "Take all the time you need, Gavin," she whispered, "but I won't wait forever." And with that, she walked out of the room. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing. I had cared for Maria so deeply, and yet she had thrown everything away. She had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way, and yet here I was, struggling with whether or not I could trust someone else again. I wanted to move on. I wanted to be happy, but every time I thought I could, the past came crashing back, holding me hostage. It was only when I was driving back to my apartment that I realized the truth. I wasn't just holding on to Maria. I was holding on to the idea of what I thought we had. I was clinging to the person I thought she was, not the one who had betrayed me. I had been living in the shadow of my past for far too long, and I knew that if I wanted to have any chance at happiness, if I wanted to truly move forward, I had to let go. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in months. I knew what I had to do. I needed to let go of Maria once and for all. She had moved on, and I had to do the same. I drove to her parents' house, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. When I arrived, I was greeted by Miguel and María Santos, as always, with warmth and love. But today it was different. I had come for closure. "I need to talk to Maria," I said, my voice steady but my heart pounding. "It's time I let go. I need to tell her goodbye." Miguel and Maria exchanged glances but nodded. "She's not here right now," Maria said, "but you should speak with her. She's been waiting for you." "Waiting for me?" I repeated, confused. I hadn't expected that. Miguel stood up and clapped me on the shoulder. "She may not have shown it, Gavin, but she's been hurting too. You both have. It's time for both of you to move on." I sat there for a while, lost in thought. But as I waited, I realized that it wasn't Maria I was waiting for. It was closure. I had been holding on to something that didn't exist anymore, and I was finally ready to let it go. I stood there in Maria's parents' home, the weight of the past pressing down on me. Miguel and Maria had always treated me like family, even after everything that had happened with their daughter. But today, the air felt different. Today, I was ready to leave everything behind and move forward. Miguel sat next to me, his voice steady but with a tinge of concern. "Gavin, you've always been like a son to us. We know what happened, and we know you've been through hell. But you can't keep carrying this burden. You need to forgive yourself." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I could. Forgiveness had never been easy for me, especially not after what Maria had done. But I understood what Miguel was saying. It wasn't about forgiving her. It was about forgiving myself. I had to let go of the pain, the anger, and the hurt that I had been clinging to for so long. If I wanted to move forward, I had to give myself permission to heal. When Maria walked through the door, I froze. My heart skipped a beat, but this time it wasn't out of anger or heartbreak. It was a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite explain. She was standing there, looking as beautiful as ever. But this time, she wasn't the woman I had once loved. She was someone else entirely, a stranger in a familiar skin. She stopped in her tracks when she saw me, her eyes wide with surprise. "Gavin?" she whispered, almost as if she hadn't expected to see me here. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. All the pain, all the anger, all the betrayal, it was still there, but it no longer had the same grip on me. I had done what I needed to do. I had let go. "I came here for closure," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "I needed to understand why." But now I realize it's not about you anymore. It's about me." She took a step closer, her hands trembling slightly. "Gavin, I don't know what to say. I've hurt you. I know that. But I've been trying to fix myself. I've made so many mistakes." I held up a hand, silencing her. "You don't need to say anything. I've heard all the apologies I'll ever need. What matters now is that I'm finally free. Free of the past. Free of you. Free of everything." Her face crumpled with emotion, and I saw the tears welling up in her eyes. But this time I didn't feel sympathy. I felt nothing but peace. The pain that had once consumed me was now gone, replaced with a sense of clarity I had never known before. "I'm sorry, Gavin," she whispered. "I thought I could have it all. I didn't realize what I was losing." I took a deep breath, the weight on my shoulders finally lifting. "It's too late for regrets, Maria, but I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do." I turned and walked out of the house, my steps light, almost as if I were floating. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had reclaimed my life. I wasn't going to let the past define me anymore. I wasn't going to be held hostage by memories or mistakes. I was moving forward. As I drove home, I thought about Amy, about how she had patiently waited for me to heal, never pushing, always understanding. I had kept her at arm's length for so long, afraid to let her in, but now I was ready. I was ready to build something new, something real. That night, I sent her a message. "I'm ready. For us. For the future. I've let go of everything." She replied almost instantly, "I've been waiting, Gavin. Let's start over." It wasn't going to be easy. Starting over never is. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what the future held. I had learned the hard way that nothing lasts forever. Not love, not pain, not even betrayal. But that didn't mean life couldn't still be beautiful. I had my whole future ahead of me, and this time I was going to live it on my own terms.